Night after night you sat at the kitchen table with a stack of envelopes like a small, accusing forest. The lamp cast long shadows across the countertop, the coffee had gone cold, and your fingers traced the numbers as if by touch you could rewrite them. "Lord," I prayed, you whispered into the quiet room, voice tight with a fatigue that felt older than you. Outside, the city hummed indifferent. Inside, your heart kept time with overdue notices, the soft ping of a bank app, the memory of a missed opportunity you replayed until it bruised. You believed, deep in your bones, that prosperity would arrive the way it always had in stories, a raise, an inheritance, a miraculous check in the mail. You'd been taught to expect provision to come from some outside miracle, and every failed attempt tightened the knot of shame and silence. One evening you caught yourself flinching at the sight of an investment seminar ad, at the price tag on a course you wanted to take, at your own hand reaching for the billfold and pulling back as if from a hot surface. "I'm just trying to survive," you told the mirror, and your reflection answered with tired eyes. In prayer you asked for rescue, in waking hours you made cautious decisions from fear, saying no to calculated risks, hiding success, and rationalizing small compromises that kept you safe but stalled. The house felt smaller, not because of square footage but because your imagination had been trimmed to fit a world of scarcity. Yet there was a soft, unassuming presence in the room with you, not loud or theatrical, more like a question that refused to be ignored. What if the problem wasn't where you look for money, but where you believe about money? If this reaches you in that place of worry or quiet shame, stay with me. If the sight of that stack of envelopes made your chest tighten, tap the like, let that small action be a first act of faith, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss what comes next. In the next scene God begins to speak not with coins, but with truth that reshapes how you think, and when that quiet confrontation reaches you, everything that felt immovable will be put on a new foundation. What thought about money limits you today? Comment your biggest financial pain, because this journey is about to turn inward, where the real wealth begins. You sit at the kitchen table under a single lamp, envelopes fanned out like small confessions, the numbers staring back like accusations. The house breathes the quiet of midnight. Outside, the city hums its indifferent lullaby. You whisper a prayer, more a pleading than a promise, and for a moment nothing changes. Then, as softly as a hand on your shoulder, a presence asks a question you weren't ready to answer. What do you believe about money? It isn't thunder or a spectacle. It is a still, firm insistence that the struggle you carry isn't primarily about bank balances but about the stories in your head. Flashbacks come, the voice that said, "We don't have money for that," the shame at success, the decision always made from scarcity. You feel exposed, but not condemned. The presence begins to unpick the thread of fear, how you've avoided investing because risk felt like betrayal, how you've hidden wins to avoid judgment, how survival choices hardened into habits. A scene unfolds in your memory, your younger self hiding a small savings jar beneath a mattress, believing safety is secrecy. The present voice reframes it, safety is stewardship. You hear, not in words but in conviction, "I won't hand you a purse of coins, I will renew your sight." It's practical. It asks you to write down every expense without judgment, to schedule 1 hour this week for clarity, to name one fear and face it. It asks for discipline, a simple spreadsheet, a plan for bills, a tiny emergency fund, so that faith has a scaffold to stand on. You try. The first spreadsheet is clumsy, a hush of frustration, then a sharp lift as patterns appear. You call a creditor with hands trembling, and the voice is steady beside you. Negotiate as one who believes in provision, not as one who expects denial. You begin to say no to small comforts that buy temporary comfort and yes to learning, one short course, one mentor conversation. Shame loosens its grip as you practice gratitude for the small returns, blessing money when it comes. Little shifts accumulate, organization breeds calm, discipline births choices, vision stretches beyond the next paycheck. You feel a new muscle forming, spiritual confidence that chooses from abundance, not panic. A door opens slightly, a freelance lead, a friend's referral, and you notice how different your hand is when you take it. There is more to come, practical, faith-rooted steps that translate this new mind into lasting prosperity. If this touched you, hold that hope, like, subscribe, and tap the bell, and in the next part we'll translate these shifts into concrete actions that break lack for good. Night presses against the kitchen window while you trace the rim of a mug, bills spread like a small, accusing city on the table. You whisper, God, I need a miracle, and the house answers with the tick of the clock. The voice that comes back is not thunderous, it is a soft question, what did you learn from the waiting? You flinch because the truth is on the other side of words you've carried for years, not enough, not worthy, not safe to invest, better to hide than risk. Those thoughts have been the quiet architects of your life. A memory surfaces, a younger version of you watching a parent refuse a scholarship because money corrupts, a teacher saying, be practical, a friend laughing at the idea of abundance. Each line stitched scarcity into your thinking. God doesn't hand you a check in this dim kitchen. Instead, He presses on the seam and lets you feel the tightness. These beliefs shape the doors you see, He says, and the room seems to expand as you begin to notice how often fear has decided for you. The next morning your hand moves almost without permission, you clear the junk on the counter, write due dates in a single notebook, and set one envelope aside labeled seed. Discipline arrives like a quiet ally, a budget that doesn't punish, a calendar block for learning, a $5 commitment to a small investment course. You call an old mentor and your voice trembles, I'm ready to learn. He listens, then offers a blunt truth, faith acts. Fear waits. The words land. You practice generosity, a small gift to a neighbor, and notice a lightness. You say no to a fear-driven purchase and feel a fragile pride. At night you pray differently, not begging for rescue but asking for eyes to see possibility. In a brief, tender exchange you ask, why not just give me the money? The reply is simple, because I am teaching you to steward what I will give. That answer rearranges the stakes. Small victories arrive, a client answers an overdue email, a forgotten check clears, an idea gets a green light. Each one is a lesson in how renewed thinking opens doors. If this touches you, like this moment and subscribe, ring the bell to continue with me. In the next part you will learn concrete, faith-rooted steps to turn these small shifts into steady, lasting abundance. You sit at the kitchen table with a mug gone cold and a stack of envelopes that feel heavier than they should. The street lights outside are thinning into dawn, and somewhere between a sigh and a whispered prayer, God begins to speak, not with thunder, but with a small, steady light inside your head. He doesn't promise a sudden check or an overnight miracle. He asks a question that lands like a mirror, where did you learn to fear plenty? Memory answers, late nights watching parents argue about money, a teacher's offhand warning that ambition leads to ruin, a childhood promise to be careful that hardened into a commandment. Those old voices are the true creditors, collecting interest in your thoughts. You argue back, the familiar script of scarcity rising, what if I invest and lose? What if I succeed and become what others resent? A calmer voice, gentler than accusation, replies, what if you steward well? What if courage is not the absence of fear, but faith that moves despite it? In the kitchen's quiet you begin to see the pattern, decisions made from survival, habits that protect a false safety, a whole life budgeted around fear. God doesn't hand you money, He hands you vision. He begins to reshape how you think about risk, obedience, and provision. The next days are cinematic in their modesty. You open a notebook and track every expense, not as punishment but as reconnaissance. You meet a mentor who speaks in practical sentences. You choose one small investment and pastorally tend it. You say no to a purchase that would have bought temporary comfort and yes to a class that stretches your skills. Each small discipline feels like a brick laid in the foundation of a new house. Shame lifts in thin layers. Confidence doesn't roar, it returns like light through blinds, steady and patient. Conversations change too. You rehearse a different language, I will allocate, I will plan, I will give. Friends notice your steadiness, God's quiet counsel becomes a companion in decisions. You discover that faith reshapes not outcomes alone but the very lens you use to see them. If this moment has touched something inside you, promise yourself one small step today. If this truth reached your heart, tap like to hold it there, subscribe and ring the bell so we keep walking together. Ahead, I'll show the specific, faith-rooted practices that turn those small shifts into lasting abundance. The morning light slips through the blinds like a slow revelation. You sit at the kitchen table with last month's bills spread out, a cold mug beside a notebook where you once wrote dreams and now only numbers. The voice inside, the one that learned fear the hard way, whispers the old script: play safe, hide, wait for rescue. Then a quieter presence steadies you. Not thunder or a sudden check in the mail, but a soft insistence: look. Look to what you believe about money. You speak aloud, clumsy and honest. God, I want to trust, but what if I lose everything? The reply isn't a reprimand but a question that lands like a seed: who will you become if you steward what you already have? The scene shifts, you at a small table with a friend who keeps his own books, the fluorescent hum of a community center where a free financial workshop is taught by someone who quotes scripture and spreadsheets in the same breath. Start small, he says, handing you a simple ledger. Faith grows through practice. So you begin with tiny, faithful acts. You make a list, overdue notices, subscriptions, a plan to call the bank. You set aside a small emergency fund, deciding that scarcity will no longer dictate choices. You practice saying "I will steward this" as you transfer $20 to a savings account. You schedule a weekly half-hour to review spending, to name where fear shows up, the impulse to avoid investment, the shame that success will change you, the habit of decision-making from panic. Each time fear rises, you answer with a sentence of truth and an action: call, ask, set a limit, give. You fold generosity into the budget, not as an afterthought but as confirmation that trust is active. There are stumbles, a late fee, a temptation to hide, but also small confirmations: a friend mentors you on a starter investment, a neighbor responds to your honest vulnerability without judgment, a scripture verse returns to you at just the right hour. You begin to feel a different muscle forming: disciplined hope, strategic vision married to simple obedience. The inner landscape shifts. Where scarcity once made you contract, clarity helps you expand. If this moment lands in you, let it mean more than comfort. Tap like if this truth resonates, and subscribe with the bell so you won't miss how these little choices open real doors. Ahead, the seeds you planted will face their first test, and opportunity will show up in unexpected ways. You wake before dawn, the house still breathing soft and cool. On the kitchen table, a stack of bills looks like a small city under siege. You run a hand over a spreadsheet you've named possibility instead of despair. The light from the window hits a clean corner where yesterday you sorted receipts into envelopes, an act so humble it feels holy. A memory of last week's quiet conversation with God returns, not thunder or fire, but a question that landed like a seed: what are you choosing to believe about what I can do through your hands? You answer aloud, the way a confidant answers a friend. I don't know if I can risk this. There is a pause, and in that pause the voice that has guided you since childhood nudges, almost tender: what if faith begins with one small, disciplined step? What if stewardship is the language of your trust? The fear doesn't vanish, but a decision forms: pay the smallest debt first, open the account you keep postponing, call the client you fear will say no. The day unfolds in scenes of practical courage. You negotiate a payment plan over the phone, and your voice steadies as you speak facts instead of excuses. You decline an impulsive purchase at a store, feeling the old shame flare and then cool as you choose a different story about worth. In church, sunlight streams through stained glass as you make a budget with your neighbor, two people laughing at how thrilling it is to label a blank line emergency fund. Your faith and your spreadsheet begin to speak the same language. A test arrives, the car needs work. Old you would panic, new you breathes, consults the envelopes, and trusts the plan you built. You pay, and later that week a small contract comes through, not a miracle of sudden riches, but the precise increase that balances the month. You sit with that modest win and feel gratitude widen into conviction. This is not happenstance. God is teaching you to read opportunities as responses to renewed thinking. You're learning to act with wise, grounded faith. If this shift touches you, stay with the journey, like with your heart, subscribe, and tap the bell to continue. In the next part you'll witness how these steady practices begin to open doors you never noticed before. You sit at the kitchen table with a single lamp slicing an island of light across overdue notices and a phone buzzing with another reminder. The night is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the small, steady voice inside you that has begun to sound different, calmer, more deliberate. God doesn't thunder from the ceiling, he leans in like a teacher at your shoulder. I'm not here to hand you a check, he says, and the words arrive not as condemnation but as an invitation. I will change your thinking. You remember how you used to pray for miracles that arrived wrapped in envelopes or sudden raises. Tonight, prayer feels like strategy. Where are my blind spots, you ask aloud, and the answer comes back as memory and possibility, the choices you made from fear, saying yes to quick fixes, avoiding budgets because they felt like confession, shrinking your goals to match your old safety net. In the lamplight you lay out a small notebook, and you begin to speak differently to the pages. I will track every dollar. I will say no to the thing that numbs my ambition. These sound like humble vows, but in the moment they feel like doorways. A neighbor, a mentor, or perhaps that still, small voice prompts a practical step: organize your accounts, set one automatic deposit for savings, reach out about a side project you've been embarrassed to sell. You remember the shame around success, the narratives that said wealth made you selfish. A gentle correction arrives: stewardship, not hoarding, service, not status. You test it, you invest a small amount in a course, schedule 30 minutes a day to work the plan, and for the first time instead of panicking you make a spreadsheet with color-coded hope. Fear visits, cold fingers of doubt. What if I lose it, you whisper. God replies less with a promise of safety than with a calibrated courage: make wise moves. Learn. Be faithful in small things. So you practice constraint and generosity in the same week. You trim a subscription and give to someone who believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself. The environment around you subtly shifts: cleaner desk, clearer mind, space for vision. You aren't wealthy yet, you are becoming wealthwise. The invisible walls begin to show their seams, and you start choosing differently, with discipline and a kind of spiritual audacity. If this change resonates, if your chest tightens and hope rises, like this moment for the heart it awakens, subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss what comes next, the first outward fruits of a renewed mind and the ways God turns those inner shifts into real, lasting abundance. The morning light finds you at the kitchen table again, but something is different, not the bills, not the list of overdue notices, but the way you hold your pen. You whisper, I don't know how, and a quiet answer surfaces, not as a miracle of cash but as a call to think differently. You remember a phrase God spoke through a still, patient moment: wealth begins in your mind. It is not condemnation, it is invitation. The scene shifts, flashbacks of late nights, hurried decisions, shame curling like smoke, then forward to a new ritual, a prayer, a budget, a ledger laid open beside a Bible verse. Start small, you hear. That smallness becomes sacred. You make a practical vow to organize one bill, one account, one recurring expense. In the local coffee shop you meet Marta, a friend who once sat where you are. She leans in and says, faith without planning is like planting a seed and never watering it. Her voice steadies you. Dialogue like this becomes your backbone: God, you are steward, I will act. The environment changes from chaos to clarity: a tidy notebook, labeled envelopes, a calendar marked with savings goals. Anxiety loosens its grip as discipline grows, not as drudgery but as devotion. You begin to spot the hidden thoughts: if I get rich, I'll lose who I am, investing is for other people, I don't deserve abundance. Each one named loses power. You replace them with trained statements: I steward well, I can learn, blessings enable service. Practical steps take shape like a map: track every dollar, automate saving, seek counsel, take small calculated risks in alignment with faith. Opportunities don't arrive as lightning bolts but as open doors that your renewed mind now recognizes and walks through. If this shift resonates, promise yourself to keep watching. I'll show a clear, faith-rooted plan next that you can start this week. If this touched you, give this video a like to help others find it, and subscribe with the bell so you don't miss the step-by-step path coming up in the next part. The breakthrough is near, and now you are ready to step into it. You sit at the kitchen table while the lamp casts a soft halo over a notebook where numbers meet prayer. The house is quiet, the anxiety that used to claw at your chest feels different now, sharper in thought, softer in spirit. In a voice that is not loud but utterly certain, God says, I will teach you to steward what I've given. You remember the old prayers for windfalls and the restless nights waiting for someone else's miracle. Tonight, the miracle comes as a shift, a map for the mind. Start small, he whispers, and you trace the first step, organize the chaos. Bills find folders, income streams get written down, expenses are categorized not as punishment but as data. The scene is ordinary, you sorting receipts, opening a simple spreadsheet, deciding which subscriptions are faithful and which are fear. It feels mundane and holy at once. You hear your own voice answer, hesitant at first, I've been afraid to invest. God's reply is not condemnation but coaching, faithfully allocate, steward even the small. You set aside a modest amount for learning, not for gambling, and for the first time you feel a brave kind of discipline. A montage unfolds, early mornings reading a financial chapter with a cup of coffee, a focused conversation with a mentor, a prayer before each spending decision. Shame about success loosens when you frame prosperity as service. Opportunities begin to appear like doors you can now see, a side project grows because you dared to price your worth, a negotiation ends in respect, not compromise. Fear still knocks, but you answer differently, you consult the numbers and then consult God. Decisions come from vision, not survival. If this shift resonates, promise yourself one change tonight, organize one account, set one goal, make one prayerful plan. If this touched you, tap like as an offering of gratitude, it helps this message reach others who need it. Subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next step where I'll give the exact daily practices and prayers that lock this new mindset into steady, lasting prosperity. You sit at the kitchen table as morning light slants through the blinds, the same stack of bills now a quiet map of what used to feel like failure. But this morning is different. The room is still, and a small, steady voice, gentle as a hand on your shoulder, reminds you that wealth began where you could never see it, inside your thinking. You remember the long nights of bargaining with God, the desperate promises, the anger when answers didn't arrive. Now you feel a soft correction, not condemnation, choose faith in how you think. Steward what I give. There is a moment of dialogue, your hurried, shame-laced questions, his calm reframing. I won't hand you a miracle to avoid growth, he says. I will change the way you decide. In practice it looks humble, a spreadsheet opened, a calendar where bills are conquered one by one, an envelope labeled seed that grows with small, disciplined deposits. You see fear loosen its grip. You invest a little courage into learning, you ask for counsel, you refuse the worn stories that say scarcity is your identity. The scene widens. You no longer chase a single lightning bolt of fortune. You build systems, monthly budgets, emergency cushions, generous tithes, targeted investments, that reflect a heart that trusts scarcity is not your destiny. You begin to steward money as a tool, not an idol. Opportunities arrive not as miracles from nowhere but as doors you're prepared to open, a conversation that becomes a contract, a risk taken after prayer and calculation, an idea nurtured into a business. Your voice changes when you talk about money, calm, strategic, hopeful. This is the promise, renew your mind and your pockets follow, slowly, steadily, with dignity. If this honored you today, press like, it helps others hear the same truth. Subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the practical roadmaps I'll share next, step-by-step habits, prayers to rewire fear, and templates to begin stewarding more wisely. Tell me below, what thought about money limits you today? Comment your biggest financial pain and we'll start breaking it down together.